Healthy, healthy, Fennec Fox. Leaning on the Lord and anchored to the rock. Gotta stay strong, gotta stay smart. It's the end of the world, so do your part. Healthy, healthy, Fennec Fox. We're shining bright and thinking outside the box. Gotta stay lean, gotta stay quick. Those Templar cyborgs are pretty slick. Healthy, healthy, Fennec Fox. It's the end of the world, so do your part. Gotta stay strong, gotta stay smart. Healthy, healthy, Fennec Fox.
All right, welcome to part 2, diet. In this part, I want to talk about eating and everything related to it. Now, there's a lot of articles on diet and eating on the website and in the book. 6 tips on how to plan your meals without stress is a good one. How to make healthy choices for carbs, fat, protein, and fiber. Those are 4 articles. And also how to heal your relationship with food. Those are all pretty good articles to look at. Many people know about eating disorders like anorexia or bulimia, but most people don't realize that there is disordered eating. Just like modern medicine recognizes outright disease, but doesn't recognize the spectrum, there is eating disorder, but then there is a lot of disordered eating. And everybody has some level of disordered eating, which is very important to realize. So this is a spectrum that you need to identify yourself on, so that you can make the proper changes to your eating habits. When I became a vegan at 12, because of my fear of getting judged by God for eating meat, this was disordered eating. When I fasted for 40 days as an Orthodox teenager and ate only vegan products and vegetables, that was disordered eating. When I abstained from dairy and gluten, even though I have no real issues with them, because I was biohacking and trying to do this or do that, that was disordered eating. When I used to log my meals and count my calories and macros and whatever else, this was disordered eating. When I was fasting in the morning and having bulletproof coffee to, quote, extend my fast so I could get autophagy benefits, even though my adrenals couldn't handle the caffeine, that was disordered eating. When I used to eat junk food without caring, that was disordered eating. So there are many versions of disordered eating left and right of the narrow road. I've been all of them to some degree in the last 20 years. And our goal is to look at the biological aspects of this and also the physiological and psychological aspects of eating. The articles that I cited are very helpful, but here's a few thoughts on both of these, the biological and the psychological. As far as biological factors, your gut health determines what you crave. If you get cravings for junk food often, that means that your health isn't the best in terms of your gut. So that needs to be looked at because the bad bugs and the good bugs all send signals through your nerves, especially your vagus nerve. It's pretty profound, actually. And they basically tell you what to eat so that you can feed them, which is phenomenal. Your deficiencies also trigger your body's cravings because what you're deficient in, let's say you have a deficiency in magnesium or copper, your body might crave dark chocolate because it knows that these things have various nutrients in them. If you have exhausted adrenals, you're going to have salty cravings or sweet cravings for energy to create substrates because adrenals need substrate to create cortisol and everything else. And they also, when you have adrenal imbalance, there's a balance between aldosterone and cortisol. Aldosterone is a hormone that controls your sodium. You basically lose sodium in the urine a lot more. That's why you crave salt when you have adrenal fatigue. So salt cravings mean that you may have adrenal fatigue. Now, just a quick FYI for the people watching this video, I'm feeling some pricklies on my face because I took a B3 thing. As I'm recording this throughout my day, I have certain things that I take at certain times, and there's just no way around it. So I'm like, I'm going to be red-faced on the video. So if my face turns super red, then you know that's why it happens. It'll probably go away. But nevertheless, that's nicotinic acid for you. I don't take niacinamide because it's not as bioavailable. I take nicotinic acid, even though there's the prickly feeling, it's much better to take. Anyway, if you can handle it, nicotinic acid is much better. So anyway, The macros you eat also is going to determine your blood sugar spikes. If you eat lots of carbs and you're having no fiber, no fat, no protein, you're just snacking on stuff, your blood sugar is going to crash and then you're going to crave even more carbs. So it's a downward cycle. Nutrient deficiencies will also send triggers for various foods so that you can replenish basically various nutrients like we mentioned before. So the conclusion is that healing the gut, healing the adrenals, and eating balanced meals, those three things, healing the gut, healing the adrenals, eating balanced meals where you have protein, fat, and carbs and fiber, less a little bit carbs, more of the protein, fat, and fiber. And also having a comprehensive nutrition plan like we discussed previously with all the basics, like minerals, vitamins, essential fatty acids, and so on. All of these work together to reduce inflammation in your body, to regulate your nervous system, to regulate your appetite, and to regulate your cravings and reduce the bad ones and increase the good ones. I'm at the point now where I don't really crave junk food. I really don't. I really don't have any craving. Very, very rarely, if I worked out really hard, if I'm really like drained, I'll have some junk food. And it's okay. You know, every now and then it's not the end of the world. You know, like we have a Raising Cane's, if you know what that is, by my house. And it's like, it's so good. It's just like fried chicken with like just crispy, like, oh, it's so good. Horrible, but it's super tasty. So every now and then, you know, it's not a bad thing. But most of the time, if you're craving that most of the time, then that's not good. So you have to give your body the good building blocks so that it doesn't crave the bad building blocks in a panic kind of way, which is what most of the time happens. The goal is you want to train your body through these things to where it wants healthy food. And you can eat more intuitively and you don't really care for the unhealthy food. This is the thing. It's called intuitive eating. Now, intuitive eating is great if your body and metabolism is calibrated. Intuitive eating is not great. There's a lot of books on intuitive eating. And, you know, you can read them. I forget the main one on it, but it's by two doctors or two women that are also doctors. And intuitive eating is great, but it's not great if you're not aligned. If your metabolism is out of whack, if you've got nutritional deficiencies, if your gut health is out of whack, if you've got inflammation, you know, all these things that are contributing to cravings. If your adrenals are messed up, if your thyroid messed up, intuitive eating is not going to do it. Do you get it? So you want to get to the point, excuse me, where you are eating more intuitively. And yeah, my face is like getting red now. But it has to be based on the right things. You have to be in an aligned state, and your body has to be metabolically aligned. Otherwise, intuitive eating is a nightmare. It's only going to make you worse. Now, psychological factors. Well, you have many disordered eating patterns, obviously, and they're all anchored in some kind of psychological imbalance. Like everything, the balance can either go to the left or to the right, either towards controlling or negligence. Control is important because we live in a toxic world, so it's important to read the ingredients, plan what you're eating, be decisive about ingredients, quality and everything. You have to control. Otherwise, you know, you can't be ignorant of all these pesticides and microplastics and crappy ingredients and additives. You can't be passive. You have to control to some degree. However, too much control becomes an obsession and you become a legalist, right? Just like with the narrow road with the Christianity. If you too much this way, you're a legalist, too much that way, and you've got license to sin, right? So the devil gets you on both sides. Same thing with diet. So controlling is useful, but too much is an obsession. Negligence is important because it's okay to live. It's okay to enjoy your life, for crying out loud. It's okay to relax and have a drink or, have some fried food every now and then. It doesn't matter. The point is you don't want that to be your base, because then you're being too negligent and you're harming your health and you're not being smart because you're living in a poisonous room full of poisons all around you. So both of these things are, important. Everybody swings in one direction or another based on their upbringing and their personal traumas. In my case, I swung towards control. Obviously, you could probably tell that, because controlling something gives me peace of mind. Having an organization, keeping it in control, it gives me peace of mind and knowing what's going on. Obviously, there's value to that. But too much of that and you become a disordered eater, whether you realize it or not. For you, it may be something else. Maybe you swing towards negligence. Maybe you're afraid of not knowing, and you don't want to deal with it. You don't want the responsibility. You don't want, as long as you don't think about it, then it's not going to hurt you. It's like a ostrich putting its head in the ground, and as long as I don't see the enemy, it's not there, right? Same thing with this. So maybe that's you, in either case, you always need to embrace the opposite, right? If you're a person that swings towards negligence, you need to learn the value of controlling. You need to learn the value of planning and organizing and taking a little more responsibility. If you're like me and you're a little control freak, well, you need to learn to relax and yes, be disciplined, but it's okay to, splurge every so often, and it's not a big deal. As long as your basic foundation is there and you are consistent 90% of the time. Most of the time you're consistent. It's not a big deal to take a break. So everybody's different, and everybody's going to experience disordered eating patterns in their life one way or another. So it's important to address both the biological issues that we mentioned and the psychological issues. Another thing I want to talk about is calorie dense versus nutrient dense. Every food is on a spectrum of calorie dense to nutrient dense. In general, the more calorie dense something is, it's less nutritious. And vice versa. The more nutrient dense it is, it doesn't have as many calories. That's not always the case, but it's a useful rule. For example, McDonald's, when you go and get a Big Mac, very calorie intense. Does it have nutrition? No. It robs you of nutrients, right? So it's very calorie dense, but it doesn't have nutrition. 100 calories of a Pop-Tart, whereas 100 calories of a grass-fed steak are two different sets of calories. They're both 100 calories, but you're getting sugar in one, which inflames your body and robs your body of nutrients, because it makes your blood acidic, and so your blood has to respond with calcium and magnesium and other alkaline things to basically neutralize the metabolic impact of the sugar, and it's harming your teeth and everything else. There's a whole impact with that 100 calories of a Pop-Tart versus 100 calories of a grass-fed, grass-finished, juicy filet mignon steak. Very different 100 calories, where you're getting nutrients, macronutrients to build strong muscles and everything else. So very different. Both are the same calories, yet both have vastly different impacts on your health, which is very interesting. So the quality of your calories is key also. So you have calorie dense plus nutrient dense, but also the quality of the calories that you're eating. In general, if you have a good diet, you should maximize the calories that are nutritious and minimize the calories that are empty, right? More steaks and less Pop-Tarts. That's the goal. Because again, you could have a 1,500 calorie diet. You could have just Cheetos and make 1,500 calories that way. Or you could have, whole foods, whole meats, grass-fed, dairy, everything else to get to 1,500 calories. Very different sets of calories. So the quality of your calories is very important. So very, very important. The SAD, or standard American diet, does the opposite. It maximizes the calories that are not nutritious and minimizes the calories that are from things that are nutritious. So no wonder that America is such an epidemic of obesity and everything else. Also, you're dealing with the impact of engineered food, which is becoming more and more popular, which I want to show you a little thing on here. Let's see if we can listen to this guy talk. He talks about other end time stuff too, or news. I don't think he's like a end times guy or a Christian guy, but he does talk about stuff that's happening. But he was talking about some very interesting things with Ozempic. Let's see.
Big Food just found a way to hack Ozempic, and they're doing it in secret. The story is actually crazy. Okay, so there's a food laboratory in Northern California called Matson that is, quote unquote, creating the future of food. It's run by this guy named Justin Shimmick, PhD. So he is a smart guy, and he has monetized his intelligence quite well. It says for nearly 50 years, Matson has conceptualized, developed, branded, and scaled hundreds of product lines, and in the process created billions of dollars in revenue for clients. And right now, their clients, Big Food, is asking them to do experiments that will reformulate ingredients so that their food can bypass the effects of Ozempic, Wegovy, and other GLP-1 weight loss drugs. Because from a financial perspective, people on these weight loss drugs are buying less food. Walmart CEO John Fernand recently told Bloomberg News that the company is seeing signs that people taking GLP-1 agonist appetite suppressant medications are buying, quote, less units, slightly less calories, which equals less profit. New York Times has reported that sales are down in sweet baked goods and snacks, and the industry is weathering a downturn. That's a big problem for these food executives. So in response, the food companies are designing what they call GLP-1 optimized products. In layman's terms, they're trying to make the food more addictive, even more addictive than they already are, because we know that food is already pretty addictive. Quote, there is little the industry hasn't tried to keep health-conscious consumers eating. Companies conceal clouds of nostalgic aromas into packaging to trigger Proustian reverie. When they discovered that noisier chips induced people to eat more of them, snack engineers turned up the crunch. Food technologists found a way to amplify the intensity of artificial sweeteners to hundreds of times beyond sugar's natural flavor. The structure of salt crystals can be altered to accelerate the speed at which they absorb into the chemical pathways that signal saltiness, allowing the brain to perceive the flavor more intensely. In the chemosensory world, referring to the science of how chemicals provoke sensations, almost anything is possible. Yeah, I suppose almost anything is possible, but I think the certainty here is that we're going to be left with a bunch of people who are still obese, taking drugs with, pretty bad side effects that no longer work. That, I would say, is not ideal. And worse yet, it's all being done in secret, okay? When asked, Justin Shimmick wouldn't say which companies he was working with to develop these GLP-1 products, saying, quote, we are professional secret keepers. These people are sick. Big food.
This is the problem, folks. This is the problem. Human greed, and we are at the end of the Genesis curse, and satanic activity is at a maximum, and human flesh and greed is at a maximum. It's going to be worse and worse. These people are paid lots and lots of money to literally figure out how they can get you addicted to food. And now with the Ozempic situation, they're panicking, and so let's make it even worse. They're making it even worse, if you can imagine such a thing, to bypass the chemical effects of the drug. And of course, let's say that happens, then what's going to happen? Well, we need better drugs. It's just a downward death spiral is what it is. Today, you have fake meat, genetically grown meat, engineered Pop-Tarts, and even mRNA food. That they're putting mRNA vaccines into food, and they want to do that. The more you learn about this stuff, the more it disgusts you. It really is just so disgusting. It makes you want to run off, to somewhere in a ranch and live on a farm. But of course, that's not possible for most people. And even if it were, you'd have your own problems with that either way. This is why eating your food has to be as healthy as possible. And obviously, it's not going to be perfect, but making decisions and being very intentional about what you eat on a regular basis most of the time, right? We don't care about 100% consistency because that's neuroticism, but most of the time, 80 to 90%, that's a good consistency. That should be on your priority list, is what you eat every day and making sure that it's quality. The meats have to be grass-fed, grass-finished, pasture-raised. The eggs have to be pasture-raised. Dairy has to be grass-fed, grass-finished. There's so many shenanigans with labeling that these people do, constantly subverting, where I saw a video the other day by, he's a famous doctor on YouTube. I forget his name. But anyway, he was talking about how grass-fed is like a scam now, where there's so many loopholes. It has to be grass-fed and grass-finished, because now they're basically feeding these cows grass at some point, but really the rest of the time they're feeding them grain to fatten them up. I'm just like, are you freaking kidding me, man? These people are just constantly skirting the law and trying to finagle their way into your pocketbooks. It is infuriating. And this is the world you live in. You live in a world of lies and deception. It is what it is, but this is the world we live in. Now, another thing to keep in mind with diet and eating is metabolism, intake, and output. These are three factors that affect your overall weight and health, and they basically are what goes in, what comes out, and what is the existing burning rate. Intake is obviously what you eat and how much, the quality of the calories, the quantity of the calories, nutrient dense versus calorie dense, that kind of thing. The output is what do you burn through movement, resting metabolic rate, thinking, what are the things that you're doing to output calories? And metabolism is how hot your engine is, right? Based on a lot of things, your inflammation, your nutrient deficiencies or lack thereof, your hormonal activity, all these things affect your metabolism. It's how hot your engine is. How these three work together affects your weight and your goals and your overall health. Dieting works only on intake. And dieting is not something I recommend. Maybe something for short term, for very specific reasons. But you should not be dieting. Dieting is a waste of time. It's about reinventing your identity and finding a new way of being and thinking differently about your body composition, your health, and your choices. That's what it's about. Dieting is just a short-term solution that often backfires most of the time because you have relapse. But the ideal solution to all this involves looking at all three, at input, at output, and at metabolism. If you want to make a change, you have to consider your output. But even this is not that important. Weightlifting to build muscle helps raise your resting metabolic rate because you have more muscle. Walking 8 to 10,000 steps per day helps to burn fat. Walking is king when it comes to fat loss. Out of everything else, it's much better than cardio because it doesn't have the impact on the body that cardio does in the inflammation that it creates on your joints. So walking is king, 8 to 10,000 steps a day. But activity is not the real issue, folks. It's not. I mean, activity should be there, and so should dieting in the sense of diet. I shouldn't say dieting. I should say diet choices and having a good diet in the sense of the decisions that you make. Not going on a diet. Two very different things. Going on a diet is disordered eating. Do you get it? And having a good diet is normal eating, meaning you're making informed, intelligent choices. But the real issue is number 3. It's metabolism. Metabolism is the real issue. Metabolism determines how many calories you burn just by existing and sitting there. Okay? That's why some people that have a high metabolism, they could eat whatever they want and they just burn through it. Doesn't mean you should eat whatever you want, but nevertheless, metabolism is the real issue. And metabolism is a complex factor. It's a complex factor of many things. Is your circadian rhythm in alignment? Is your inflammation low? Are your hormones balanced? Is your gut in top health? Are your toxins at a manageable level? Is your weight in a healthy range, right? Because if you're obese or overweight, remember that the more fat you have, that's generating leptin resistance, estrogen dominance, all these things that are happening. It's a downward spiral. So that is another important factor. Diet and exercise are immediate things you can change, and they can have some results over time, obviously, but you can't change your metabolism overnight. It doesn't happen overnight. Metabolism is a practice, and it reflects your discipline, your consistency, your decisions over time, and it's a constant dance of a million things that we're talking about in this presentation. Now, metabolism also slows down with age. The older you get, things slow down. That doesn't mean that it's hopeless. It just means your discipline has to go up as your metabolism goes down. Do you get it? It's like they're both related. When I was in my 20s, I didn't have that much discipline. I would do whatever I want, and my metabolism was pretty high. As I get older, my metabolism slows down a little bit. It's not like in the gutter. I mean, I still have a decent metabolism, but my discipline has to be higher than it used to be in order to maintain that level of metabolism. So that's really important. If you want to change your body weight, if you want to change your health, you have to look at your metabolism. And there's a lot to talk about on that, because too many people go on yo-yo diets as solutions where they're cutting a bunch of calories and trying to lose weight. That's not how to do it, folks. It's better to have slower results and consistent results without the swings from dieting like crazy, then going into relapse. And of course, when you diet, you're also changing your metabolism because your body senses that there's less calories. So it's saying, oh crap, I need to adjust and slow my metabolism because then I'm going to burn less. I'm getting less, so I need to burn less. So you're actually shooting yourself in the foot because you're slowing down your metabolism. And then when you go back off the diet, you're eating a little more and you're going to gain the weight back because your metabolism is slowed. You get it? So that's not the right way to do things. The way to do things is to focus on all the aspects of metabolism, which are, again, nutrition, exercising, having supplements, detoxifying, reducing your stress, aligning your circadian rhythm, all these things that are a practice. Dance your way through life. That's what it's about. It's learning how to dance, and you have to learn the steps if you want to learn how to do the choreography. Think less about how much weight do I want to lose, in quotation marks, and more questions like, who do I want to be? Who do I want to be? Do I want to be the person that is complacent? Do I want to be the person that has a gift from God and I've been given life and I'm going to just be complacent with that gift? Or do I want to be the person that takes action and discipline and is creating results in their life and creates the things that they want to see in the world? Again, God is doing all the work through us, but God's grace is reflected through us through our own motivation and action. So lean into that new way of being. Lean into a new action, a new idea. Pursue it. Create evidence for yourself by doing something. It's very, very important. Your body weight, your body fat, your energy levels are all an expression of your commitment to yourself and the commitments that you have to other things, right? When you see somebody, and again, everybody's different. You know, some people have genetic issues, some people have thyroid issues that are genuine issues. But let's say you take the average American person who's morbidly obese or overweight. You look at that person and you can tell right away what they are committed to and what they are not committed to. Did you get it? Because your body speaks louder than words, what you're committed to. So if you are committed to certain things, they're going to show up in your life. If you are committed to other things, they're going to show up differently. Your actions in the world determine what you are committed to. That's why when you observe somebody, you can see what somebody's committed to. And the commitment is something internal. And that commitment reflects externally through your actions. Look at the fruit to know the roots. The question is, do you see yourself as tired, overweight, sluggish, having brain fog, complacent, undecisive? Do you see yourself as that? Or do you see yourself as somebody who takes action? Most people would say, no, I don't want that identity. I don't want to be tired, overweight, sluggish, having brain fog, complacent, whatever else. Okay, well, then don't commit to that. Commit to a new identity. Commit to somebody who is energized, healthy, sharp, taking action, having a good body composition. Don't have to be perfect, but having a healthy body composition and vibrant. See yourself as that and walk towards that outcome with prayer, with action, with research, with everything that you've got so that you can make a difference and commit to that identity and work toward it every single day. Whether you get there or not is up to God, but the commitment on your part is what matters, right? That's the important part, is where are we pointed to? What are we aligned to? It's not going to happen overnight because, again, metabolism doesn't change overnight, but consistency is how you get there. And when you do get there, it's not going to be about the goal anymore. Did you get it? It's not going to be about the goal. It's about you internalizing the process and a new way of being. When I used to train my students to go compete at competitions, and they would get ready for the competition and learn the choreography and learn the technique, and you got to do this and got to do that, and then it would be over after like 10 minutes of dancing. All that hype, all that travel, all that makeup, all the dress, rehearsals, finally it's over after 10 minutes. And then what? Well, when's the next one? Even if I had to drag them tooth and nail to this competition, after they did it, they never regretted it. They always wanted to do the next one. Eventually they do the next one, then the next one. Then a few years later, after doing all these competitions and stressing out about how the girl that's cuter than her with that dress, why does she get first place and I got second place, and all these dramas that come into place. Eventually, if they stick around long enough, they would realize that it's not about the events. It's about the process. It's about you having the identity of a dancer, of you having the identity of a performer. That when you go on the floor, regardless of the outcome, because it's such a subjective system and you can't control what's happening, that you do your best and you internalize that moment and you make it authentic. So that when you walk off the floor, you know that you did something true and authentic. And that's what it's about. You have to come to the point to internalize the process. Initially, you need external goals to chase, like carrots. But in the end, it's about internal process. It's a way of being. I am going to be healthy. Health is something that I want and who I am. Does that mean I have perfect health? No. Like I said, I still struggle with certain issues that are very frustrating, despite all my knowledge, despite all my discipline. Those are issues for you and God. But nevertheless, my identity, my commitment is to my health because God has given me a body. And that body is a gift. Even though it's dying, it's a gift. And you should treat it with respect and love. And so I'm committed to that outcome. How close I get to that outcome in my mind, who knows? That's going to be up to God. But the point is that I'm committed in that direction, and so should you be. Now, the question is, how do you lose fat? Well, it's about the basics. You need a couple of things in your repertoire. Obviously, having a good calorie or a nutrient-dense diet with good decisions is very important. Taking care of all the things that I mentioned with your metabolism is very important. But there's a couple of just general things that you can do right away. You should have high NEAT, N-E-A-T, non-exercise thermogenesis, which is basically a fancy word for moving around. I sit at my computer quite a lot, doing what I do, and I have to constantly remind myself to get up and move around. I try to walk it several times a day, but moving around and being active with just random stuff in the house is actually a very good thing for your metabolism and your exercise. Walking 8,000 to 10,000 steps a day, very based on research, that is the threshold that you need for fat burning. Shape your identity around a new way of being in health. Change your lifestyle, your habits, your decisions, and walk in that direction, and you're going to see a big difference in your body composition. Another thing is building muscle mass. You have to increase your resting metabolic rate, meaning the rate at which your body burns calories. And the way to do that is to build muscle, because muscles are the ones that build calories. Fat cells do not burn calories. Muscle cells build calories. They are the thing that we need. So we need to maintain muscle mass, especially as we get older. The problem is that in order to build muscle, you need to have hormones. Thyroid, sex hormones, cortisol is also useful in it, anti-inflammatory and so on. In order to balance hormones, you need to address your diet, your nutrition, your habits, your toxins, your gut health, and everything else. So you see, everything comes back to the basics. You know, if you have adrenal fatigue, if you have hypothyroid symptoms, or even clinically hypothyroid or subclinical hypothyroid, where the doctor doesn't recognize that you're hypothyroid, but actually you are hypothyroid, you're underperforming, then your body's out of alignment. Right? It's not aligned. You're sluggish, and you're trying to push yourself to lift weights and do the building muscle. Building muscle is like, it's what happens when all the stars are aligned, you can build muscle. Because that's a very specific process in your body. Okay? Let's put it this way. If you have a lot of resources, then okay, great, let's build muscle. The body's ready to build muscle and it's aligned and ready to go. But if you're in fight or flight mode, if you're in a stress recovery mode, if you're inflamed, if you're damaged, your body is in preservation mode. It's not looking to build muscle. Okay, it's not going to say, let's divert everything and die, but at least we'll look good. It's not going to do that. Your body is in preservation mode. So you need to gently move your body with good nutrition, with good diet, with regular exercise, foundational exercise like walking, NEAT. And then when your body's more aligned, you can have weightlifting as part of that, which is important to maintain or build muscle mass. Too many people think they can hit the gym when they are, again, out of alignment, whether it's hypothyroid or adrenal fatigued or whatever else, or they have toxins and their body's just not recovering. Exercise does not help you lose fat. Exercise is not about burning calories. Exercise, at least weightlifting, is about building muscle so that you can, it's like investing in passive income, okay? Resting metabolic rate is passive income. You are making negative calories, just sitting there. Okay, you're investing in that. And the more you invest, the more you build muscle, the more your resting metabolic rate increases. And so that maintains your body composition in a healthy position. But again, you can't just push your body into those situations unless you've handled the foundation, which is your metabolism, which is a series of those things we basically outlined. Because if you're in a recovery phase, and certainly like when I came out of 2021 and my thyroid was shot, I started working out in 2022, but I started doing just like push-ups and things that I wasn't like super hardcore lifting weights. It took like a year or two to start lifting weights again. And I've been lifting weights ever since, and I've gained some muscle. But the point is that if you're in a recovery phase, then focus on a good diet, focus on rest, on gentle exercise, and getting your nutrition in and getting everything aligned hormonally so that you can have a good metabolism so that you can lift weights. Eventually, you want to lift weights 3 times per week for muscle growth and maintenance. And that's really important because that's going to keep your resting metabolic rate and your body in an anabolic state. That's really important. If you're just walking, that's okay, but your body's not really anabolic, meaning you're not in, again, remember there's those 2 switches, right? Yin and yang. One of them is growth mode, one of them is self-preservation mode. If you're just walking, it's good for recovery, but you don't want to just walk. You need to do strength training exercises to maintain your muscle mass and to grow muscle mass and to trigger your body to think, oh, okay, we're kind of in growth mode right now. Because otherwise, if you're just walking, that's not enough to tell your body to be anabolic. And it's just like a switch. When the anabolic switch is on, your metabolism works differently. If your body's in self-preservation mode and you're more catabolic, then you're breaking things down more. That's no good. So dieting also doesn't help you lose fat, just like exercise doesn't help you lose fat to some extent. Dieting actually restrains you because oftentimes when you're dieting and eliminating calories, you're losing muscle, which is the opposite effect that you want. So dieting is not sustainable. It's not useful long-term because it restricts your calories, it shuts your metabolism down, and it's only useful in short-term situations because it's a waste of time most of the time. You don't want to lose weight by dieting. You want to build muscle. You want to align your metabolism. You want to feed your body good building blocks and nutrition and vitamins and minerals and so on so that you have a foundation to realign and basically recalibrate your body. The key to practice all of these things is to practice the basics that I'm describing to you and to optimize them over time based on your own conditions and situations. Remember that weight is not about the final outcome. It's about internalizing the new identity, the new lifestyle, the new way of being that is correlated to that new body composition. Okay, what does that mean? What does it mean to be 10% body fat? I don't think people need to be 10%. I think 15% for males and something like 20% for women is totally healthy. But what does that mean, right? Most people are 30%, 35% body fat. What does it mean to be 20% body fat as a woman or 22% or 15% as a male? What does that mean? It means a new identity. It doesn't mean, oh, I got to do this, I got to do that. Well, who is the kind of person that does those things, right? Who is the kind of person that is a little more structured? That's a very organized person. You have to be that person, and then the action will happen naturally. So it's all about thinking about these things differently and putting them into action consistently. Now, another thing I want to talk about in this particular part is the importance of blood sugar. Managing your blood sugar is one of the most important practices of your health routine. High blood sugar damages the tissues in your body, and since blood is everywhere, this is very dangerous. That's why diabetics have a lot of problems later on if they don't treat their diabetes. So there are some genetic factors, and obviously that can affect how you metabolize carbohydrates and sugars and things like this. You can learn about these through genetic screenings, like taking a genetic test, but most of the issues, I would say 80%, are lifestyle problems. They're lifestyle decisions that have compounded over time with negligence. Type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune problem. It's probably due to casein, because casein, I believe, has a similar protein structure to the pancreatic cells, and early exposure, the body kind of triggers it and it feels like it's being attacked and so on. So then it starts attacking pancreatic cells. There's a lot of interesting literature with that. Either way, type 1 diabetes is autoimmune. And we know that autoimmune issues happen with some sort of early assault on the immune system when it's young and there's a toxin of some kind that's making it into the bloodstream, and then the immune system just goes haywire because of that toxin. Type 2 diabetes is a lifestyle disease. Today we have even obese or diabetic children, which is just so sad, man, to see these kids that are, like 8 years old, 9 years old, 12 years old, and they're just, 200 pounds or something crazy. When I said tutor kids, I tutored kids for quite a while. You can imagine how that went. Oh, it's Tudor the tutor, I would tutor math and English. And I remember working with these kids. Some of them were like, I don't know, 7 or 8, maybe like 9 years old, something like that. They were pretty young kids, And there's this little blonde girl I'll never forget. She was eating this bag of like candy worms for her snack after school. Literally eating the whole frickin' bag, man. I'm like, what are you eating? She's like, oh, these are my snack. She's like, whoosh, grabs and takes the whole thing. I'm like, you weigh probably, 40 pounds, 50 pounds, and you're taking an entire bag of sugar into your body. That is so crazy. And this is the problem. Her parent is not educated because that is bad parenting. That is bad parenting to do such a thing. So strategies for managing blood sugar. These are different for everybody, and everybody's going to have different specific needs, but there's some basic ideas. In general, these things are things for everybody that everybody should think about. Number one, take manganese and chromium. These are minerals that are directly involved with insulin, and they help manage your blood sugar. And if you get them chelated, it's even better. Obviously, you should get them only chelated, and you can get them from Swanson for super cheap. They're super tiny pills. You can take them once a day. Take a product called Metabolic Daily Pro, which I sell on the stores from Pendulum. Or if you have like really hardcore insulin resistance or even type 2 diabetes, you can try glucose control. Both of these are probiotic products. They're researched with Akkermansia and other specific strains that have been basically bred, I guess, for GLP-1 issues and blood sugar and everything else. The glucose control product, I don't sell in the store yet at the time of this video. It could, maybe we'll see if there's a demand for it. Metabolic Daily Pro is good enough. If you have diabetes or you're really insulin resistant, these things can help because these bacteria can also impact how your body responds to blood sugar spikes, to insulin releases, and so on. So it's very interesting research with that. You can eat differently. Obviously have more proteins, a little more healthy fat, a little more fiber, and less carbs, all in that order. So protein, so when I consider a meal and the components of a meal, the priorities should be protein, assuming all of these are high quality, protein, healthy fats, fiber, and carbs. Carbs are the last thing to add to your plate. I'm not saying you shouldn't eat carbs. Carbs are great. They're delicious. God made carbs really good. But we also live at the end of the Genesis curse. And carbs should be added last. Number 4, avoid processed food. Avoid sugary or salty carb snacks that are processed, like Pringles, which I know are super tasty, but they're terrible. They're terrible for you. So avoid these things. Do not snack on carb snacks. Snack on whole foods like pistachios or whatever else. Something that is whole food. Exercise regularly, like we just mentioned. Again, if you're in a recovery phase, stick to walking, maybe some light exercise. And then eventually, as you do all these things, get back on track and start weightlifting a couple times a week. Walk for 30 minutes after your meals. So after you eat, about 20 to 30 minutes, that's when the blood sugar spikes the most. Take a walk or go on a, like for right now, when I'm recording this video, it's super hot outside in Phoenix. So I bought like this little Stairmaster thing and just like 10 minutes, just kind of intense stair walking to blunt the impact of the blood sugar and insulin, because that way it helps shuttle the sugar into muscle cells and it's being used. Otherwise, the sugar doesn't get used and the body is having to respond with more insulin, and then your body becomes desensitized to insulin, you become insulin resistant and so on. So this is what you want to avoid. So if you want to diminish the insulin spikes, walk for a little bit, for 30 minutes or so, if you're walking, or if it's intense exercise like the Stairmaster, 10 minutes, and do that within 20 minutes of eating or so. And of course, employ all of the strategies in this presentation in general, and you will have much better blood sugar control. I do believe diabetes 2, type 2 diabetes, is a lifestyle disease and it can be reversed. Depending on everybody, obviously somebody's been type 2 diabetic for a while and they have a lot of damage done because of the sugar, then you could still recover quite a bit and heal your body, but certain things might be damaged. But nevertheless, you can still make a difference. Either way, you can still make a difference because it's a lifestyle disease. It's not, some uncontrollable thing. In general, these things will help you avoid becoming insulin resistant and become rather insulin sensitive. You want to be insulin sensitive, not insulin resistant. Now, what about the carnivore or keto diets? Well, these things are very popular today, and certainly they have some results, but I don't think they work for everyone. Keto is really hard to do, and quite frankly, I think it's unnecessary. Yes, it's true that ketones give you energy in your body, can burn fat and be in ketosis. But ketosis is a stress response, okay? We didn't grow up eating fat and being in ketosis. Ketosis is a stress response that your body has in case that you don't have access to carbohydrates for energy. So it doesn't mean that you should be doing that all the time. Carbs are very satisfying, and they're also useful because they give you energy. The problem is not carbohydrates, because God created these things to be good. The problem is the sedentary lifestyle that we live, and it's also the quality of the food that we eat. It's become ultra-processed. People have eaten bread for thousands and thousands of years. Bread has been a staple. God made bread to be good because, of course, bread points to Jesus. Jesus is the bread of life. But bread is like a staple thing. The problem is not bread. The problem is pesticides. Way more gluten in wheat than ever before because of genetic modification. Brominated, which is bromine, which is a halogen, which is a toxin. Brominated flour. Stripping the wheat of all of its nutrients and processing it into white flour, adding crappy nutrients like iron oxide and non-methylated folic acid, which all of these give your body inflammatory reactions if you have genetic issues. So these things are the problem. It's not bread. So bread is not the problem. Modern life is the problem. I have Ezekiel bread, which is very tasty and it's very healthy. I also eat organic sourdough. And these things are excellent. They're very delicious. Sourdough, by fermenting the wheat, it reduces the gluten in there. It's not, most of the time people don't have a gluten problem. Most of the time people have problem with all the other things I just mentioned. Pesticides, bromine, added, iron oxide, non-methylated folic acid, all these additives that they add to make it nutritious, but it's nonsense. Instead of just leaving the whole food. So, carbs are there. They're good. We're talking whole food carbs, not, Pringles or Cheetos. Carbs are good, but they should be eaten in moderation. If you're active, carbs are great. If you have a not active day, then try to minimize your carbs. Just a general blood sugar strategy. Regarding keto or the keto diet, keto I don't think is practical, but the principles of keto can be taken to your dieting decisions, and you can take the good from it. It's good to minimize your unnecessary carbohydrates like refined sugars, processed carbs, high-calorie carbs, and so on. It's good to do that. It's good to lower your carbs on non-active days. It's good to prioritize high-quality protein and fat in moderation. It's good to eat nutrient-dense vegetables and a variety of natural foods. All these things are very good. However, some people have a lot of gut health issues, whether they're autoimmune issues or inflammatory reactions or whatever else, and they have allergies and gut imbalances, gut dysbiosis, fermenting issues, all kinds of issues that can happen with the gut. And so these can lead to food intolerances. And as a result, the carnivore diet can help quite a bit in people who have gut health imbalances and food intolerances. For short term, I don't recommend doing the carnivore diet long term. People may disagree with that. People may swear by the carnivore diet. I just don't think, I base my views on the evidence. I just base it on the evidence. There is no longitudinal data on massive populations with the carnivore diet over a period of 50, 60, 70 years. There's none of that. Okay? There are many problems with the carnivore diet in theory. Number one, it's highly expensive to eat grade A animal products only. If you're just eating grass-fed butter, grass-fed steak, pastured eggs, whatever, all these things, if that's all you're eating, that's very expensive. So it's not for everybody. Number two, everyone has different genetics in how they process saturated fat. Saturated fat can be a problem if you have the APOE gene SNPs. You can look into that, but it's basically, some people don't manage saturated fat very well. They don't. And on this diet, you get a lot of saturated fat. Saturated fat is not evil, okay? Saturated fat is good, but it also should be done and taken in moderation because some of it can be inflammatory, especially for some people with certain genetic issues. Everyone has a baseline metabolism and metabolic issues that may not be well for having an all-meat diet. Eating lots of animal products also increases your heme iron intake, which can be inflammatory in certain situations. heme iron versus non-heme iron, which comes from plants, heme iron is much more well absorbed. That's why women should not be vegetarians, because a menstruating woman is losing iron in blood, so you need to be having heme iron. But if that's all you're eating, especially if you're a male, that could be inflammatory. I'll give you an example. In my case, I have low binding proteins in the blood. Every nutrient, like whether it's copper or iron or these things are metals, okay? Metals are reactive. The body doesn't want that floating around in the bloodstream, reacting to things, okay? So what it does is it binds metals in a protein. Remember chelation from a couple sections ago? Your body does that with binding proteins. Iron has a binding protein, and so does copper, called ceruloplasmin, okay? You don't have to memorize these things, but you have to know that iron is bound by a protein. Everybody has genetic variances on how much binding proteins they make. In my case, after many years and many tests and many experimentations, I realized that I make low binding proteins. What does that mean? Well, it means that imagine that there's little, trucks, okay? Little trucks that can carry iron. Well, I don't have that many trucks, okay? I don't have a disease, but on the range of things, it tends to be on the low end. Okay, my binding capacity is towards the low end, which means that if I eat a lot of, heme iron, or if I'm taking a lot of iron supplements or whatever else, my saturation in my blood goes very high because the binding capacity relative to the amount of iron is not proper. Does that make sense? So the binding capacity is lower, meaning eating a ton of red meat all the time is not a good idea. I eat meat. I think meat is great, but nevertheless, everybody's different. So if I were to eat only meat, if I were to eat only steak every day, that would not be very good in my case because of my binding proteins. And that could be inflammatory, having that much iron in the body. Especially being a male, I don't have a period, so ultimately you have to find some clever ways to get rid of it, like taking curcumin or whatever else to try to chelate iron from the body. But nevertheless, this is the problem. A one-size-fits-all approach does not work, especially when you have such an extreme diet. Another issue is purines in the blood. Purines in the blood, basically, when you eat animal proteins, there are metabolic effects of breaking down the proteins. One of them is called uric acid. And uric acid can form little crystals. I learned about this when I used to look at blood under the microscope a long time ago. And these things over time can create inflammation. They can lead to other problems like spicules and fibrinogen, and basically structures in the blood that eventually lead to stroke. For example, that's why a lot of these bodybuilders have had strokes, because they've eaten so much protein. They've eaten so much protein, like excessive amount, like 300 grams of protein per day, which is absolutely insane. Even if you are huge, you do not need that much protein. And what happens is your body metabolizes that into crystals, uric acid crystals that need to be urinated and filtered from the blood. But if you have so much of it over time, it starts to create little structures called spicules, and spicules turn into other things. And eventually you have, these structures in your blood. Your blood starts to clot and you have problems. So protein is good, but like anything else, it has a biphasic response. Too much is not good, and neither is too little. So everything has a narrow road. Another thing with the carnivore diet is how most people have low stomach acid. Most people have, and you can test this with something called a Heidelberg test, where you can basically swallow a pill and it sends back, data and tells the receiver what your pH is, how your gastric emptying time is. It's a very useful test. It's a one-time thing, and usually a naturopathic place can do it. So you have to look in your area where you can get a Heidelberg test. But most people have low stomach acid. So what does that mean? Well, that means that if you're going to be eating these really difficult to digest foods like steak and eggs and, fish and chicken and whatever else all the time, well, then you're just asking for problems, because eventually if you have all that fatty, difficult to digest food, that might cause issues with your stomach, and you might have pain in your esophagus from the stomach acid that your body's trying to use to break these things down. And then you might have to be dealing with heartburn and everything else. So everybody's different. Everybody's different. Animal nutrition doesn't provide fiber, and it also doesn't provide certain important nutrients for the gut. So you have to supplement these nutrients and take probiotics and have some sort of prebiotic fiber, which we'll talk about to maintain your gut health, because you're not getting them from the diet. There also may be an increase in homocysteine from the methionine intake with meat. Methionine is an amino acid, and it's very prevalent in meat products. And again, the meat is great, but if you're eating only meat and animal products, then you have to do something with glycine. Now, glycine is found in collagen, so technically that's part of the carnivore diet. But, you don't know. Maybe you need more, So homocysteine is an issue because that's inflammatory, and you need to reduce that with B vitamins and methyl donors like TMG or glycine. Glycine can help balance out methionine, which can indirectly affect homocysteine levels. If your homocysteine levels are elevated, that is a inflammatory situation that can lead to a heart attack or other problems. And again, you need to still supplement certain nutrients because you're not going to get them in your diet. Meat and animal products, especially if they're high quality, are very nutritious. They're very good. But you're not going to get everything that you need in a therapeutic amount. You just can't. You cannot get every single nutrient in therapeutic amounts. You have to supplement. And I know some people may disagree with that, but that's the truth. That is the truth. We live in a world where food is not what it used to be, okay? 1,000 years ago, food was very different than it was 500 years ago, than it was even 100 years ago. The produce that the animals eat that are producing your food is not the produce that used to be 100 years ago. It's not as nutritious. That means that your animal meat is not as nutritious. These things were made by God to be incredibly nutritious. Are you kidding me? You don't need to take supplements in the original plan. But in the plan as it is now, today, at the end of the Genesis curse, then yes, you do need to take supplements because you live in a toxic world. Food is not what it used to be, etc., etc. And the other thing is, again, there's no longitudinal studies on the carnivore diet. All the studies, all the blue zone studies of all the centenarians, they all have the same general pattern. They eat lots of natural foods. They eat lots of lean meats. They have a balance of fiber and carbohydrates. They have good fats like olive oil. And they have lots of activity and very low stress. So this is the thing. You also have things like the French paradox and the Rossetto effect, if you've heard about these things. The French paradox is obviously probably more common than the Rossetto effect. French paradox is like, all these French people are living for so long, and yet they're eating like cheese and wine and everything else. So that's very interesting. And of course, you also have the Rossetto effect, which is something that happened in, I think it was Philadelphia in the early part of the 19th century, where you had a lot of Italians that were migrating to this little town in Philadelphia. And it was a community. It was a very tightly knit community. And these people were eating like deli meats and all kinds of things that you shouldn't be eating all the time. And yet they had, comparatively to the other communities around them, their rates of stroke and heart attack were like practically absent. Even though they were eating, they were smoking, they were doing all kinds of like terrible things. So that was a very interesting study. And what they found was that the benefits of the social impact that this community had on each other were somehow counteracting all the crappy dietary decisions they were making. Now, do not take that as a license to go and eat whatever you want as long as you're hanging out with your friends. That's not the point. Because what happened was that community eventually grew, and then the people moved away, and so it eventually assimilated to the other communities. And then they had the same rates of heart attacks as the people around them. So there's something to be said about things that we just don't understand about aging. That doesn't mean that you can eat whatever you want. So the point is that we don't understand this stuff all the way. These things are just conjectures. On one hand, it is valuable to eliminate, a bunch of vegetable products and just eat meat, because most people are not, you can't be allergic to meat. I mean, some people have allergic to like eggs and the protein and dairy and stuff like that. So, there's that. But even those things, usually allergies, when you have allergies to food, it's because your immune system was exposed to some kind of toxin. Some of the way these things work is, something maybe affected your gut as a little toddler. It gave you leaky gut, and then you had some milk, and then that casein got through those tight junctions into your bloodstream, and your bloodstream, being young, recognized it as a foreign invader, and then, it had other issues that it was attacking after that. Or there was some sort of heavy metal that was in there and it overstimulated your immune system, like the vaccines. And it just went downhill from that. I mean, look at, for example, all the kids, right? All the kids in the last, 20, 30 years of them upping the vaccine requirements. There is a marked increase in what? What do you see? Autoimmune issues, gut issues, right? Nervous system regulation. You see all of these increasing. Why? Because these toxins lead to exactly these problems. So if you have some kind of immune reaction to food, it's because you have probably some toxins, and those things might be still there. Something to think about. Nevertheless, all of these things show that, so the French paradox, the Rossetto effect, the blue zones, the longitudinal aging studies that talk about relationships and life purpose being much more significant than diet, all these things together show us that, it's not, diet is not that important. I mean, it is important, but it's not like everything. It's more important to have good relationships. It's important to have life purpose that you're acting on and feeling integrated into society and contributing. So is carnivore worth it? Well, some people swear by it. I'm more conservative. I think it can be useful for people who have gut issues to help you heal and get back to a normal eating, because carnivore is a disordered eating. It's a disordered eating pattern. Okay. If you take offense to that, I'm sorry. I'm not calling you crazy or anything else. It's a disordered eating pattern. It's not normal. Okay. It's a disordered eating pattern. It can be useful short term to help you get back on to basically the track. But people did not eat just meat and eggs and fish every single day. Okay. They had a wide variety of foods. So if you're reacting to certain things, you need to get to the bottom of why you're reacting to those things and figure out what it is. Was it a toxin? Was it something you need to resensitize your immune system to through gradual steps? I don't know. There are specialists that talk about these things. But nevertheless, it should be done temporarily while you test and see what's going on. It shouldn't be done as a long-term thing because there's no data on it. And again, with all the things that I mentioned, there are plenty of people that are going to fall into the category where carnivore is not a good idea for you. So one more thing is, how much protein do you need? Well, and we can leave on that with this section. Protein is relative to what you're doing. We need a lot less protein than what the mainstream says we do, because a lot of that also is based on lobbying, right? Because people who are beef manufacturers, dairy manufacturers, they have an incentive to say, oh, you need protein, you need this, you need that. You do need protein, and the quality of protein really matters. So protein is something to think about that has several considerations. The first thing is that the standard 1 gram per pound of body weight is nonsense. Okay, I weigh 175 right now. I'm not going to eat 175 grams of protein. That is way too much protein, especially if you have low stomach acid, if you're not taking digestive enzymes. Where do you think that protein is going to go? You think it's magically going to get assimilated into biceps or triceps? It's not. Protein has to be broken down into amino acids. Then those amino acids, if they're in the right proportion, they get assimilated into various things. But if your body senses that you have way too much of one and not enough of the other, the one that it's not using just gets eliminated. Okay? So blood sugar, that your body has ways to make blood sugar from a lot of different things. The carbohydrates are the first source, but blood sugar can also come from protein and also fat. So the body has a variety of mechanisms to turn all of these sources into sugar. What happens with protein is that when you eat a giant fillet of whatever, whether it's fish, chicken, or steak, when you eat that fillet, not all of that protein is getting assimilated into your body. Okay, so the quality of the protein matters. Now, of course, a grass-fed, grass-finished fillet is much better than some grain-fed cow, which is very important. But even so, that protein is not getting assimilated. If you have whey protein and you're putting that in a shake, not much of that is getting assimilated. I think something like 20 or 30 or 40% is getting assimilated. If you have eggs are probably the best source of whole food protein there is. Eggs, if you have eggs, the protein that you're getting from the egg is the highest quality protein you can eat from a dietary source because of the amino acid profile. It allows the amino acids to be utilized. So even within quality food, you have different levels. Now, I'm not saying you should count, how much protein you're getting in each thing and be obsessive about it. But the point is, you also shouldn't obsess about getting a ton of protein because it's not good for the body to be packing in so much protein. Most of that protein is going to be broken down to sugar. And then if your body's not using it, you're going to deposit it as glycogen and reserves. Or, if you are using it, then great. But nevertheless, you don't need 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. You really don't. If you're working out and you're building muscle, then I think between 1 gram of protein per kilogram of body weight and 1 gram of protein to, or 1.5 grams of protein to a kilogram of body weight is decent. Okay, so I have about 80 kilograms that I weigh, something like that. So eating about 80 grams of protein to about 120 grams of protein for me is more than fine. But again, you get even more specific because if you understand that weight is not just your body weight, it's a composition of your muscle mass, your bone, and your fat mass. And you can get a Teneta scale like the one I have over here in my room, and you can weigh yourself on there. It's not expensive. It's like $40 or $50. And it gives you a bioimpedance analysis. Now, is it atomically accurate? No, but it's a good estimate. And through that estimate, through your estimate of your body composition and your water percentage, you can get a rough estimate of your body mass and your fat-free mass. And you can look up these calculations online. Basically, how do I calculate my fat-free mass? Because what you want to get at is how much muscle do I have? If you weigh, again, it's like 100 calories of Pop-Tarts, 100 calories of a steak. If you are 200 pounds, okay? If you're 200 pounds and you have 40% body fat, that's very different than being 200 pounds and 15% body fat. Very big difference, right? Two different sets of calories. So one person that has a lot more muscle and is 200 pounds and 15%, that's a lot of muscle. And they're, 6 foot, whatever, right? Well, their metabolism is very different and they can handle more protein. If you are 200 pounds and you're 40% body fat and you are trying to eat as much protein as somebody who's like a bodybuilder, different calories, then your metabolism is already slowed down. So it's not going to be able to handle all that protein. So you're just causing more problems for your kidneys and everything else. I don't believe in high protein amounts. I really don't. I don't think we need that much protein. Because another thing too is you can take amino acid powders, which is what I recommend in the various articles. You should be taking those at least 10 grams a day of amino acid formulations like Perfect Amino. If you want to get the cheaper version, it's Optimal Amino. They basically do the same thing, although Perfect Amino has some other things in it that are very good, like the nucleic acids. But nevertheless, if you have 10 grams of that stuff a day, if you do 30 grams of that per day, you don't need any more protein in your day. So I take 10 grams in the morning, and then if I'm working out the day, I also take another 10 grams plus some arginine and citrulline for blood pressure, for nitric oxide, before my workout. And that's it. Between that and whatever else I eat, like I have some eggs, I have maybe some meat for lunch in some way, and then I have like a turkey sandwich at night. That is more than enough protein to last you all day. You don't need more protein. And you should be digesting your protein. So you should take digestive enzymes. So you're worried about digesting your protein. So most people think, oh, what's the amount that I need? Well, it's not so much the amount. You should shoot for, again, 1 gram per kilogram of body weight. If you're working out and you're active, I would say 1.5, but no more than that. You don't need a pound. You don't need a gram per pound of body weight. Some people even say like 1.5 grams per pound of body weight or 2 grams. That's insanity. You can't even eat that much. And of course, then what you do is you start drinking these protein drinks that are horrible, that are just overwhelming your body with senseless protein that most of it's going to get turned into sugar. It's pointless. So don't think about how much protein you need so much as, am I getting quality protein? Is the protein that I'm getting digested? Am I including amino acids to at least get guaranteed building blocks? Because when you take an amino acid supplement like a powder, those amino acids are immediately uptaked into your body. They don't need to be digested. And Perfect Amino is in a blend that respects the ratio. So all of this can get basically none of that gets turned into sugar. Your body's using it. This is the problem with other things because some of it gets turned into sugar. Doesn't mean you should not eat steak or chicken or whatever else, but the point is that it's not as efficient, right? So better to have a supplement. That way you don't put so much pressure on yourself to eat all these other things or to supplement with crappy things like, these various milk drinks or whatever else that are like 30 grams of protein in an 8-ounce thing. It's just full of soy protein and pea protein and all this other crap stuff. This is crap. Amino acid supplements are the best way to do it. And then on top of that, having a good diet with, steak and chicken and fish and whatever other good things that are out there that God has made for us. So now we're to part 3, exercise.
Healthy, Fennec Fox, leaning on the Lord and anchored to the rock. Gotta stay strong, gotta stay smart. It's the end of the world, so do your part. Healthy, Fennec Fox, we're shining bright and thinking outside the box. Gotta stay lean, gotta stay quick. Those Templar cyborgs are pretty slick. Healthy, Fennec Fox, it's the end of the world, so do your part. Gotta stay strong, gotta stay smart. Healthy, Fennec Fox. The time is coming, the time is now. Time to get healthy, the healthiest in town. Strong paws, big ears, and laser eyes. The Templar cyborgs will be mesmerized. Healthy, Fennec Fox, leaning on the Lord and anchored to the rock. Gotta stay strong, gotta stay smart. It's the end of the world, so do your part. Healthy, Fennec Fox, it's the end of the world, so do your part. Gotta stay strong, gotta stay smart. Healthy, Fennec Fox.